Hi, everybody. Welcome back for part two. Here we are. We are talking about cycles of matter. So let's jump right in. We're going to talk about the water cycle, right? So our water cycle is what moves water molecules around. It's really important for photosynthesis and respiration. And let's go ahead and jump into it. So starting from the top over here, we're going to start with water falling from the sky. Again, rain, sleet, snow, hail, all these things are forms of precipitation. As that precipitation falls, it's going to do one of two things. It is either going to soak into the ground, which is what provides us with groundwater. It's going to soak into the ground through a process called infiltration, which just means to filter in. Then, as that water moves through underground rivers and highway systems of water movement, we're going to call that is percolation. So it's percolating, it's going to go through. Now, the other way that water can move is it can stay on the surface, forming streams and creeks and rivers and lakes and oceans. And so we have surface runoff. Surface runoff is going to flow through all of our water systems, eventually landing in the oceans. Now, all of our surface water is also subject to this thing called the sun. The sun heats up or provides kinetic energy for the water molecules. As they get enough energy, they can then escape from liquid form. They then become gas form. We call that evaporation. Evaporation, as the gas molecules go up into the atmosphere, the air starts to cool, the air molecules move in closer to each other. There's now no room for the water molecules, and so they condense into liquid form. That liquid form in the sky is clouds. Clouds are not made of gas, water in the form of gas. They are liquid water that are suspended in the atmosphere. When those clouds get heavy enough and there's enough water in them, the water molecules group together and fall again, either in the form of sleet, snow, rain, hail, etc., and we have precipitation. Here we have our carbon cycle. Our carbon cycle is made of a lot of complex structures and processes and lots of things going on. The big takeaway here is that there are activities that bring carbon from the atmosphere into the geosphere and the biosphere, and there are activities that are releasing carbon from the geosphere into the atmosphere. Some of these activities are natural activities that are things that are just part of natural processes, and some of these are human activities. At the end of the day, if we look at the balance between activities that are removing greenhouse gases like methane and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere versus those that are producing those greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, there is definitely an imbalance where human activity has tipped the balance. And human activities like agricultural activities, burning of fossil fuels, activities like deforestation, burning down of forests to create cattle land, all of these activities have upset the balance where we are now releasing much more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than is being removed through the atmosphere through various natural activities. Another cycle that's super important is nitrogen. Now, nitrogen is stored mostly in the atmosphere. 78% of our atmosphere is nitrogen. Every time you take a great big deep breath, 78% of what just went in your lungs is nitrogen. Now, unfortunately, our body doesn't use the nitrogen from the air. We have to get our nitrogen from the food that we eat. And thank goodness we do, because our DNA is partially structured on nitrogen. So how do we get nitrogen from the atmosphere into the ground in a usable form? Our friends, bacteria, do the trick, right? So we talk about bacteria. We usually think of bacteria as being negative, but there are a lot of really good bacteria. Our soil is full of beneficial, healthy, wonderful bacteria. And they have many different jobs. Some of their jobs working with organisms like legumes, beans, and peas to take nitrogen from the atmosphere and fix it into a usable form in the soil. Some other bacteria decompose dead things, releasing the nitrogen back into the soil and into the atmosphere. Some other bacteria take some of that fixed nitrogen and turn it into nitrites and nitrates, which are usable by plants. Even lightning can take nitrogen and put it into the atmosphere. So I take it from the atmosphere and put it into the soil, although that is a small process and that's not the main process. So again, what are the big takeaways from this is that bacteria, so having bacteria in your soil is really important. Having healthy living soil is critical to a good nitrogen cycle, and that the largest reservoir of nitrogen is in fact the atmosphere. Both of these cycles are considered feedback loops. Feedback loops are systems of cause and effect or chain reactions. There are two types of feedback loops. We have positive feedback loops, which are considered reinforcing. Positive doesn't mean good in this case, it means reinforcing or making an effect stronger, either weakening an effect or strengthening an effect. When we look at positive feedback loops in data, we're going to see things with a positive slope or things with a negative slope, going to one extreme or the other, away from the center, away from balance. Negative feedback loops are generally good feedback loops in our ecosystems and in our body. Negative feedback loops are balancing feedback loops where they keep things around the center. There may be some fluctuation up and down. For example, carrying capacity. The relationship between predators and prey around carrying capacities are negative feedback loops. Going back to the human body, there is a system of negative feedback that is done in all sorts of different situations by our body. One example being outside on a really hot summer day, maybe doing some sports or activities, and you're hanging outside. So going back to that nervous system, which is responsible for maintaining our homeostasis and running our negative feedback loops, our brains receive a stimulus. That means some kind of outside response. Our brain receives that information. Our brain then sends a signal out to our body to then respond. In this case, our body would have a rise in body temperature. That would cause our skin and to send the signal to our brain that then senses this change in body temperature. It would then signal the body with a command from the brain down to our epidermis, to our skin cells, to start to make our skin sweat and to make the blood vessels dilate, allowing for our body to decrease body temperature back to homeostasis. In this activity, if we were to graph this activity, we would see in this particular case that we have an up and down, that this data goes up and down, but tends to go up and down and fluctuate around a set point, which happens to be about 98.6 for humans. This would be an example of negative feedback. Again, inside Google Classroom, if you click on that link, it is going to take you to more examples. Food webs and energy pyramids. Food webs are another example of feedback loops where effects in one cause, or a change in the population of one causes a change in the population in other areas. In this activity, we looked through a decreasing frog population and how that would affect the different organisms within the system. So your job was to, for example, say if there's a decrease in frogs, what would we expect to happen to other organisms within the food web? If we look at a specific food chain within a food web, then we are going to be looking at an energy pyramid. An energy pyramid kind of tells us about how energy moves through the ecosystem. The rule of 10 applies here for both the biomass and for the energy. At each level in the ecosystem, because each level is filled with living things, the energy that enters that system, 90% of it gets lost. It does not make it to the next level. So, for example, all the sunlight energy that's taken in by those plants and grass and dandelions in the first level, 90% of that energy is going to be used up by the dandelions. 10% of that energy is going to pass on to the rabbits when the rabbits eat the actual grass. So 90% of that energy gets lost, usually through heat energy, through cell activities. 10% of that original energy makes it to the rabbits. Now, the rabbits are living things as well, and they have cellular activities. They are respiring, they're moving, they are having cellular division happening. They're just alive. And so 90% of their energy gets lost. And when the snakes eat them, only 10% of the energy in them actually goes into the snake and is used by the snake. Again, 90% of the snake's energy gets lost. And then we have our hawk or eagle at the top. And so if we start at the bottom with 100% of the energy, then the rabbits have 10%, the snakes 1% of the original energy, and that hawk at the top has only takes in 0.1% of the original energy that was available in the grass. So what are some other things that get lost at each level? Biomass. In the case of all these organisms, because they're doing cellular respiration, carbon dioxide is lost at each level. Again, remember that carbon dioxide is a byproduct of cellular respiration. So as the cells are producing energy, they are also producing carbon dioxide that the organisms at each level are breathing out or respiring out. The last video we're going to move into is the video reviewing experimental design.